This is CNN Breaking News.
We have some sad news to report to you. Former First Lady Rosalynn Carter has passed away at the age of 96. The Carter Center confirming her death just a few moments ago. Here's CNN's Wolf Blitzer with a look back at her life.
A soft-spoken, small-town girl, Rosalynn Smith Carter became one of America's most charming First Ladies. Born in Plains, Georgia on August 18, 1927, she was valedictorian of her high school class and met and married Jimmy Carter when he was in the U.S. Navy.
I love and respect and cherish and honor my wife, Rosalynn.
When Mr. Carter's father died in 1953, they moved back to Plains to manage the family's peanut farm.
I didn't want to go home. I was having a good time. I think I thought I had outgrown Plains, Georgia. Had gotten a little too big for my britches. I only pouted for about a year after we got home.
They had 4 children, 3 boys, Jack, Chip, and Jeff, and later daughter Amy. In 1962, Jimmy Carter entered politics, and Rosalynn hit the campaign trail.
Campaigning was fun, up to a certain point. I got to travel and see the whole country. The most fun are the people you meet.
She supported her husband's successful bids to become governor of Georgia and later president of the United States.
So help me God.
Congratulations. Mrs. Carter was actively involved in her husband's presidency, attending Camp David meetings and cabinet briefings. She was a strong advocate for equal treatment of the mentally ill.
If they had coverage for their mental illness, then the overall health care costs would come down.
When the Carters left the White House in 1981, spearheaded a new challenge, Habitat for Humanity, building houses for the poor.
The whole community has come together to get rid of poverty.
A year later, they established the Carter Center, a foundation devoted to promoting human rights, resolving conflicts, and eradicating diseases. Mrs. Carter continued to focus on reducing the stigma of mental illness.
I'm really, really proud of you and very impressed with what you can do.
Another focus, caregiving, an issue close to her heart, as she told a congressional committee.
It's been part of my life since I was 12 years old. And my father was diagnosed with leukemia at age 44. We lived in a very small town, and all the neighbors rallied around. But I still vividly remember going to my secret hiding place, the outdoor privy, if you can believe that, to cry. That's where I could be alone.
In 1999, Rosalynn and Jimmy Carter were honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest honor for civilians.
Rosa and I have visited now more than 115 nations in the world.
Mrs. Carter was often irritated that her husband was praised more for his achievements after his presidency than those of his administration. But she accepted that was politics.
Doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be criticized for it. And so do what you want to do.
And they were a remarkably close first couple. Jimmy Carter used to say Rosalynn was much more than his wife.
It's always Rosalynn to whom I turn for the primary advice, and we make the decisions together. She's the matriarch. When our 11 grandchildren or our 4 children have a problem, they call Rosalynn first because they know that they'll get a sympathetic ear.
She remained by his side, occasionally joining with other first families, and later supporting each other in their twilight, she with dementia and Mr. Carter in hospice. And in the 39th president, Rosalynn Carter got more than just a husband.
My life with Jimmy Carter has been more adventuresome than I ever dreamed it would be.
Rosalynn Carter dead at the age of 96. And joining me now is Jake Tapper, Chief Washington Correspondent, and of course, host of The Lead here on CNN. Jake, I'm watching that obit piece, and when you think of Rosalynn Carter, you think of her close relationship with her husband, the former president. You also think about all the work she did on behalf of mental health advocacy and really the role that she played as First Lady and really formalizing that role. What are your thoughts as we get this sad news this afternoon?
I think, first of all, that as you note, her advocacy for mental health was really decades ahead of its time. She started that work after her husband was elected governor of Georgia in 1970, that's when she really started doing it. She was appointed to the Governor's Commission to approve services for the mentally and emotionally handicapped, and she did a statewide tour of mental health facilities across the state of Georgia, and she described her efforts as her biggest accomplishment there as First Lady of Georgia. And she kept up that same campaign when she was First Lady of the United States from 77 to 80. And you think about all the efforts that are right now being made for mental health and to bring mental health parity with other forms of health care. And you think about how long it has taken for that to happen and how much of a stigma still exists. And she was doing this campaign, back in the 70s. She testified before Congress on this issue in 1980. She was only the second First Lady in history to testify before Congress. The first one was Eleanor Roosevelt. It's really remarkable how ahead of the curve she was. And this really, this remains stigmatized in 2023. And she was doing this, and it was kind of risky for her to be doing this. So I think that in terms of her public service, is really something to be lauded. And then, of course, there is the love that she and her husband had for each other, which was, a really remarkable love story.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And you're right. You're talking about she was a woman, a First Lady, advocating on behalf of this very stigmatized thing, mental health, which still people fight to get to see a doctor that they need in the mental health space. It's still hard to get to. And it is remarkable how ahead of the curve she was in that. And another thing that is that I always think about when something like this happens is it really is closing a chapter of American history. This was somebody that played a big role both in her personal life, but also to a lot of Americans.
She did. And she was, when she and her husband came to Washington, D.C., they were kind of shunned for being of the modest means that they were. He was a peanut farmer. They were of humble origins. And though there were people of modest means that came to the White House after them, certainly the Clintons and the Obamas were of, at least originally, of humble means. The Carters were, really rural people and were not of Washington society. And that was something to their detriment in terms of Washington society. But I have to say, when I was in college, I did an internship at the Carter Center, and actually on the topic of Middle East studies with Dr. Ken Stein, who had a big falling out with Jimmy Carter, with President Carter, over Israel and Palestine many years later. But the love and the marriage and the romance between President Jimmy and First Lady Rosalynn Carter was something that I think charmed Americans, even his detractors. Their love was so remarkable. And several years ago, in 2015, I got to interview President Carter, and I asked him what their secret was, how they were able to keep their marriage so strong. And he said, he said a number of things, and one of them was, it's really good to you have to pick your partner carefully. You have to make sure you pick the right woman or the right man. Second, he said you have to give each other space to do your own things. 3, he said, basically don't go to sleep angry. Don't go to bed angry. You have to reconcile before you go to bed at night. And then 4th, he said, try to find everything you can think of that you like to do together. And for them, that was family. So for anybody out there, I do think that Rosalynn Carter had a wonderful life. She really did have a wonderful life. It is a life to be celebrated. It is sad that she has left. But she did have a wonderful life. And I think that's one of the great things about the Carters is that they've always known how blessed they were, and they've always celebrated that. And their marriage is something that I think we can all look up to and all take a lesson from. So anyway, for anybody looking at them and wondering how did they make it, how did their marriage last, how was it so strong, those were the 4 lessons Jimmy Carter gave me back in 2015. And I've certainly tried to adhere to them ever since he told me them back in 2015.
Yeah, they're very good lessons and ones we should all aspire to and adhere to. And you mentioned kind of their modest means when they came here to Washington. And I'm always struck by the fact, they returned back to Georgia after he was out of office. They continued to teach Sunday school at their local church. It was just kind of inherently who they are and were, and it seems like they really kept that sense of self through this extraordinary life that she had.
Yeah, and it's not like they then built a giant mansion and a golf course and lived this life of luxury. They returned to relatively modest means and a life of service, setting up their charitable foundations and building homes for people who need homes. And Jimmy Carter obviously partnering with the man he beat in 1976, Gerald Ford, and they worked on a number of projects together, including election reform and then going abroad to try to supervise elections in other countries. I know we take democracy for granted here in the United States, although we probably should not. But he always has been active, and Rosalynn Carter too, maintaining that same humble lifestyle of maintaining a. And Jimmy Carter would praise her as the matriarch of the family, the person who kept the family together with dozens of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and he would credit her for holding it all together, holding the family all together. And it really was a magnificent marriage and a magnificent couple. They really were lovely.
It is an incredible life that they built together. Jake Tapper, thank you so much for your reflections there. We really do appreciate it. I want to bring in Wolf Blitzer, CNN's Wolf Blitzer, of course, host of The Situation Room. And Wolf, before we had you on, we played for everyone your beautiful piece that you put together, really laying out Rosalynn Carter's life and all that she accomplished and did both personally and professionally. What are your thoughts now upon learning this news and your reflections on her and her life?
Well, I'm first of all very, very sad because she was really a remarkable woman, a wonderful first lady, a loving mother, a loving wife, and she really was a special lady by everyone who knew her well. Everyone who knew, I met her on several occasions, going back to when I was a young reporter. I remember covering the Camp David Accords when President Carter was negotiating a peace deal between Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin at Camp David, and I remember she was also involved in that, and she always worked with him. She always helped the president, and she was directly involved in. And recently, a couple of years ago, when I went down to Plains, Georgia, to interview the former president, Jimmy Carter, she was there. We spent some quality time together, and you could see what a special woman she was, especially as they were getting into their 90s, and both of them getting sick and suffering from various illnesses. She was always there for him. She was always so special for the family. And I just feel so sad now that she has passed. It was just the other day that the Carter Center announced she was beginning hospice care, and then all of a sudden, so quickly, she passes away. It just makes me sad to report this and to hear about it.
I know it went very quickly, and I want to read to you and everyone a statement from her husband, former President Jimmy Carter, that just came out. Rosalynn was my equal partner in everything I accomplished. She gave me wise guidance and encouragement when I needed it. As long as Rosalynn was in the world, I always knew somebody loved and supported me. It's a really tender message from President Carter.
A beautiful message and a very honest message indeed. When I was there in Plains, Georgia, a few years ago, we all had dinner together, and you could see the special relationship that existed even then, as I said, well into their 90s. It was just an amazing relationship. It was so wonderful to see that, and I just enjoyed every minute spending some quality time with them.
And Wolf, you've covered so many presidents and first ladies over the years. You know, she really molded that role into something that it ultimately has become in these modern times. She attended, as you mentioned in your piece, that she attended cabinet meetings. She went to Camp David meetings. That was really unique at the time. It was really trailblazing.
It really was, and I give her an enormous amount of credit. And President Carter, you know, was always so praiseworthy of her. You know, she was intimately involved in every little detail. She would go to those meetings. She would help him with his speeches. You know, she was always there for him. Even in these final years, she was always there for him. And it was just really nice to see that in a couple that had been married for so long, almost 80 years or whatever. Right. Yeah, it was really amazing.
And you mentioned you went down to interview them. Can you tell us a little bit about their life down in Georgia? We were talking with Jake about the modest means in which they went into the White House, and then they returned back to Georgia after he left the White House and really continued to live the life they'd always known. It was not some fancy jet-set life.
And they were both so determined, even after leaving the White House, to do good and to get involved in all these important causes to save lives, not only in the United States but around the world, and to help people who are in need, Habitat for Humanity. It was just so important to them, that's why he received so many honors, so many awards. She was upset that he was getting more of these awards for what he did after leaving the White House than getting these awards, while he was the President of the United States. And it was just for me, it was just an emotional, moving experience to spend that quality time with them just a few years ago. Even as they were both suffering from various diseases, they were still a loving couple, so special. And then to see their kids, who were all adults, of course, but then be with them and cherish them and love them so much. It was just a wonderful family. I was just, I feel privileged that I got to know them even a little bit.
I know. I'm just reading now that they had 4 children, Jack, Chip, Jeff, and Amy. They have 11 grandchildren, 14 great grandchildren. So quite a family that they built together.
A beautiful family indeed. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. All right, Wolf Blitzer, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts there on this as we mark this moment. We're going to have more on the life of Rosalynn Carter, who has died now at the age of 96, in just a moment. Stay with us.